Welcome into this week's edition of the Knox Weekly Podcast. My name is Grant Pepper. Episode 2, I'm here in the mayor's office. So Matt Starr is with me, the new mayor of Mount Vernon. We are here in, this is going to be what, your 6th day as mayor or something like that?
This is day 5.
Day 5, okay. So how are things going so far?
Day 4. I'm sorry, it's day 4, yeah.
Day 4.
Yeah, I'm amazed at how quickly things do move
Uh-huh.
in the mayor's office, how quickly some of the business of the city works. And, we hear how government is very, very slow. Well, it's slow to change, but things that have been going on forever they move at the speed of light here. So
Yeah.
anyway, it's catching up. It's really the challenge for me is to make sure that the business continues to go, and then we do take the time to make sure that we start gliding into the initiatives that Safety Service Director Rick Zick and I want to make sure to happen.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people, I think, generally understand what you do. They see your name a lot in print. Mayor's a pretty high profile position, but for this conversation, I want to get into a little about who you are. So the person behind the name, I guess. So let's start in the beginning. And from what I remember, you told me a while back, you're a Hoosier at heart, right?
I am, yes.
So take me, soup to nuts. Who is Matt Starr from the jump there, I guess?
Sure. Well, I grew up in Plymouth, Indiana,
Uh-huh.
which is a town very similar to Mount Vernon, at the crossroads of Route 30 and 31, about 25 miles south of Notre Dame. And if you head to Chicago, you go right through it on 30. And anyway, I grew up playing football, basketball, went to Manchester University near Fort Wayne and played football. And that was where I went to undergraduate school, and then knew I wanted to, of all things, get into sports psychology.
Okay.
And so I then started a master's program, completed my master's program in sports psychology at Kent State University.
Mm-hmm.
In a turn of events where I was selected to go and work with the United States Olympic team in Colorado Springs in 1990, was about to hit. Desert Storm happened.
Wow.
And the federal government yanked all of the funds to pay for my salary as a sports psychologist. So instead of going to work with the Olympic team, I worked at Pizza Hut.
Wow.
So, and
this is in Indiana?
This was after I graduated with my master's at Kent State University. So then I started just waiting tables and doing anything I could after graduate school, and then landed a wonderful job at the Apple Creek Developmental Center, working with over 300 people with varying degrees of developmental disabilities, intellectual disabilities, and physical disabilities, and loved it. Absolutely loved it. And so it was a way I was a recreation director, so it was a way that I actually got to implement or use my sports psychology background. And in that, it wasn't always about just recreation. It was about teaching somebody how to walk, or teaching somebody how to swim, or somebody how to brush their teeth in some cases. And so I really just loved organized healthcare. And that was with the state of Ohio. Took a transfer to the Mount Vernon Developmental Center in 1992, I think it was. And then I lived in northern part of Knox County, and then moved into Mount Vernon shortly thereafter. Fell in love with the community, and just, this is home now. I've lived in Ohio longer than I lived in Indiana, so I'm kind of a Buckeye, but I still say "Go Irish" every now and again. So.
Yeah. And I was in Paragraphs the other day, and I saw I was looking at the local author section, and you wrote a book.
I actually wrote a couple of books, yeah.
Okay.
But I wrote the first book I wrote was a thoughtful caregiving, and it was based on how we can design for zest for living and inner peace, and avoid. It was a response to a series of abuse cases that had happened in institutions and nursing homes. And we also, in my other earlier career, produced a series on abuse prevention. And this really looked at what power caregivers actually have, and it's about emotional responsible caregiving. That was the first book that I wanted to do, and the second book wasn't about the bad examples of caregiving, but I needed something that was were good examples of caregiving that people can sink their teeth into. It's I can do that, and I was wondering how on earth am I going to write this book? Well, in 2015, 4 years ago, after a disappointing election and a lot of things that were going on, I ended up having a sudden cardiac arrest, and I was dead for about 5 minutes.
Wow.
I was thankfully in the hospital here at KCH, Knox Community Hospital, and in the intensive care unit recovering, and they brought me back to life. And so as I went through the steps of recovery, there was my book, and it was a gift, and I was able to capture all of the things that create a wonderful caregiving setting or caregiving skill that don't cost any extra money, that don't require more staff, that don't require more meetings, and that require no new paperwork. And so these were the examples that I used in that book, that allow people to be able to see, this is what we can do to make the caregiving environment softer, to make it so that people can recover well. And that was the second book that I wanted to write. There's another one that I'm kind of working on. It's more of a dramatic narrative story.
Really?
Well, writer to writer, we got to write. It's just like breathing and drinking water. You just have to do it.
Yeah.
And so I'm kicking around an idea that's inspired by an actual abuse case. So healthcare is near and dear to my heart, among other things. And we've got so many healthcare organizations in Knox County, and at some point, each one of us needs one.
Yeah. So you got us to the point where you're in Mount Vernon. Then what?
Well, when I was in Mount Vernon, I was working as a building. I guess it was a building administrator. They called them QMRPs. Then it was qualified mental retardation professional, and it's been since the language change happened with the developmental disabilities. It's qualified developmental disabilities professional.
Okay.
And essentially, I was in charge of in charge of one of the buildings for 32 men and women with varying disabilities, 24/7, 365.
Okay.
So budgets, programs, and making sure that all the services that we said we were going to happen for the people living at the center happened. And it's where the buck stopped. So if something didn't happen, it's my fault.
Yeah.
If something did happen that wasn't supposed to, it wasn't necessarily my fault. It was my responsibility.
Right. Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I learned there. But I started teaching at Central Ohio Technical College, doing business and psychology classes. That was a lot of fun. And also coached at Kenyon College, coached football at Kenyon College for 7 or 8 seasons with a very good friend of mine, Vince Arduini, who doesn't live here anymore, but has very, very strong ties to Mount Vernon. And I love him like an older brother. The Mad Italian, I used to call him. It had a short fuse, but it was over. You just knew it. But I learned a lot from him. He's a very good friend, and I still consider him to be a mentor of mine. And then at that point, I had it was getting to the point where I needed something else. I wasn't sure what it was, and I was fiddling around with my dad's camera and editing software back in Indiana, and I said, "Hey, can I do something?" And I just loved the whole media production. I just consumed it, and so I took a leap of faith in 2002, and my then partner, the late Nancy Adams, took an early retirement, and we started Icon Video Production. And we had a studio down on South Main Street here where the Coleman Gallery is. We used all 3 floors of that. They were wonderful to let us start out. And we cranked out in our first 2 years, we cranked out over 300 commercials.
Wow.
I mean, we were doing
For who?
Dirt cheap. Our first free commercial that we did was for a TV and appliance store back in Indiana.
Uh-huh.
Our second freebie that we did was for the old Jody's restaurant.
Okay.
And then we did a third one that we did was sort of introductory, was for the old Banana Joe's. They're all out of business now, so I don't know what that means for us. But anyway, but our first paid job was with Lanning's Foods.
Huh.
And so we actually have a copy of that check still at home. And we did a 30-second spot for them for, I think, $300.
Okay.
Dirt cheap, you know. And then it just started taking off, and we launched into, I think we knew we were onto something when we started getting recognized for our work.
Mm-hmm.
So, we initially knew that in 2003 or 2004, we received our first Telly Award, which was for Glen Hill Orchards. And I remember Maureen Bookwald,
Mm-hmm.
I remember Maureen Bookwald coming to us and saying, "Hey, I've got all these apples at the end of the season I just want to sell. Can you put together a 30-second spot to help me move this inventory?" And lo and behold, we put this thing together. It was just endearing. There was a little girl that was one of the daughters of one of the workers there, who was our star in that, and all the writing and the filming and the direction and the music all came together that we were recognized for it. So it was a big deal. That's what the Tellys are to the commercial industry international is what the Emmys and the Oscars and the Grammys are to their respective industry. And it's not in competition with each other, but it's to an industry standard. And one of the former producers of the Tonight Show, the Johnny Carson Tonight Show, started that. Mm-hmm. And now it's in its 41st or 42nd year.
And you won that while you were starting out, in the Coleman Gallery building,
Yeah, that was it. We did all that magic. We shot it in the field, obviously, at Glen Hill Orchards, and produced it right downtown here.
Wow!
So, and now we've just won our 14th Telly. We won the Silver Telly this time, which was great for a doctor, an endocrinologist in Columbus, Shop with a Doc, and she's phenomenal. And what I love about it is it's storytelling. And again, writer to writer, stories just we just need stories every day. We need those victories.
Yeah. So how do you go from, your interest in the healthcare industry and that, and then also your interest in film to being mayor? What's the connection there?
It's one of the things that I was doing while I was starting out at Icon, then Icon, which is now Coco's River Productions, was involved in the Heritage Center Association, as it was known then, which is now Main Street, Mount Vernon. And I worked as the downtown manager as a temporary basis. I wasn't something I wanted to do full time. But I remember sitting with a very good friend of mine. It was a neighbor in the next building at 222, where Dave's Cosmic Subs is located, Debbie Erden. And I was talking with her and a couple of others about what we were going to do in terms of membership, promotions, organization, how we were going to work with City Council on creating some legislation that would invite economic development.
Okay.
And Debbie just stopped me in my tracks. We're sitting at the library at the alcove, and she just stopped me and said, "Matt, I wish you would just run for mayor. Just run for mayor. Do not pass go. Just go do it." And I said, "Debbie, I'm flattered that you think that." I was just kind of flustered. I had thought a little bit about it beforehand, but when someone you really respect says you need to do something, you pay attention. And she is a very skilled executive. She knows what cool is. She knows what branding, and she knows what message. I said, "Debbie, why do you think I'm flattered, but why do you think I should run for mayor? I said, well, you know how to communicate to others. You know how to get everybody on board. You know how to inspire people and cut through the clutter to get everybody to want to be a part of it. So you need to do that. And so I then began to get more involved in the nonprofit community, to not only healthcare, but working with the Convention and Visitors Bureau, the Dynamic Music and Arts Festival, the Heritage Center, then now Main Street, Mount Vernon. We did some work for the Red Cross. We've done some work for the animal shelter. And, really seeing how the community is connected through these different nonprofits and educational institutions, as well as the business community. The chamber was another key area where we were able to excel and help out. And then I began to see how things worked with the government and how these partnerships, these strategic partnerships and relationships all happen. It's that, and what I learned is it wasn't a government that did anything, or it wasn't a business that did anything. It was the relationships that accomplished the things that go on in the community. And that's an awesome feeling to be a part of that. And to know that that's really how our town, our history started, is in people being able to figure out how to work together.
Yeah. And so obviously, at this point we're entering a new decade, and so not only we're ending a 24-year mayoral career, and we're also entering a new decade. So I guess, in a nutshell, over the next 4 years, maybe longer than that, if you run again, if you're reelected, what's your vision? When people ask you what's your vision for our city, how would you describe that?
Our vision for this city, it is the roaring 20s, baby.
Okay.
It's the roaring 20s. My vision, we're going to have a lot of fun. I expect that we're going to see a lot of economic development happen. I expect that we're going to see a lot of abundance. I think there's going to be a lot of challenges. We need to figure out, we need to continue to do what we do best, the government does best, and that is making sure that our community is a safe place to be, live, work, play, raise a family. And we need to make sure that we have safe drinking water. We need to be able to flush our toilets. We need to be able to get from point A to point B with as few interruptions as possible. That makes sense. And and we need to make sure that we're, our business community is well engaged, and we are constantly just building the character and the strength and our relationships with each other to make all these things happen. And we're on the cusp of a lot of incredible things happening. And Dick Mavis I've got some very big shoes to fill with Dick Mavis. He did a great job, and he and Joel and the rest of his team have set forth an incredibly important project list, infrastructure that is so crucial to making commerce happen, making life happen, getting from point A to point B. That we've got to obviously continue to do that. And if we can do those things, infrastructure, public safety, great, safe water and everything, those are the basic fundamentals that the public expects out of the government. We can also be that first step in connecting resources. And this is where the relationships are so critical. If we know somebody who is homeless, what resources can we connect them to? If we know somebody who has an addiction or a mental health issue, what resources are available? That's where we got to know people. And it's not where law enforcement comes in and we just, punishment. No, it's those connections. It's those connections with the Mental Health Recovery Board. It's those connections with the United Way, with the Chamber, with the Winter Sanctuary, with Salvation Army, Interchurch Social Services, among dozens of others that do much better than what the government could do for people. But we can be that first connection. We can be that lead in connecting people.
Okay. Well, I'd like to thank you for engaging in this conversation and allowing me to kind of ask about your upbringing. And thanks for joining me on this podcast. This has been the Knox Weekly Podcast. If you want to follow along, you can. Right now we're on SoundCloud, so you can follow our SoundCloud account, Knox Pages. You can also listen on YouTube, and we'll be kind of growing this podcast as we go here. But thank you, Mayor, for joining me. I appreciate it. This has been the Knox Weekly Podcast.
Thank you.